Got
Okay.
it.
Now we should be moving. Well, you can continue from wherever. Yes.
Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and share some slides. It's not crucial that you see them or that you worry about viewing them while you're going through this experience. They're just there if they're helpful and you want to take a glance. So I will go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to invite you to go ahead and make yourselves comfortable. Whatever that means to you, you can remain seated with your morning coffee, or you can have a lie down, close your eyes, whatever feels great right now. And we're just going to start with a little bit of somatic body mapping, um, to just sort of get us connected to our thoughts, to our feelings, and ready to do some internal work. I hope those of you that are peeking at the screen can see my slides. Please let me know if you can't. So let's begin by just taking a couple of nice deep breaths in through our nose. Hold those breaths for a few seconds, and then a nice exhale out through the mouth.
Uh, we are
Yeah.
not seeing slides, Kimberly.
Okay. Let me try again. Do we have them now? Yes? All
Yes.
right. Excellent. Okay, so sorry for the interruption. Go ahead and you can resume that sort of relaxed state, eyes open, eyes closed. Nice deep breath in through the mouth. Hold that breath a few seconds. And exhale as you feel comfortable. Just starting to tune into our inner world, checking in with ourselves, seeing how we feel today. Morning is a nice time to do that, to start to set yourself up for the day, to set yourself up for the rest of this conference. One more deep breath in through the nose. And as we exhale, I'm going to ask that you start to think about your feet. Concentrating on your feet, whether they're flat on the floor or if you're laying down, you can feel them relaxed against a bed or the floor. And we're just observing, we're just noticing any particular sensations that come up for us, tuning into where our feet are in relation to our body, really training our brain to be able to quiet our thoughts and to start to focus on where our feet are in relation to our body. If you want to play with tension, flexing, pointing the feet, building tension and releasing it, you can experience that in your body and see how it feels today. Just deep breath in if you can. One more time. In through the nose, hold. And a nice big exhale out. If you're laying on the floor, maybe you sink into the floor a little more. And we're going to move to our legs. Same idea, just shifting our focus to our legs. Nice deep breath in. And exhale as you feel ready. Are you feeling any tension in your legs? Any stress? Any gripping of the thighs? Just center your focus there for a moment. Take another breath or two in here, really tuning into your legs, not letting any other thoughts invade our mind. Last deep breath in and exhale it out. And let's move into our stomach, focusing on our stomach. often a place of tension, a place of where worry is stored, concern, fears. Tune in, see what's going on today. Deep breath in and exhale it out. And from there, we're going to shift into our arms. Focus on both of your arms if you can. Are they rotated up? Are they rotated down? Are your fingers tense? Are they relaxed? Just get a sense of where you are today. Are you holding tension anywhere? Continue to breathe in and out. And one more nice deep breath in through your nose, out through your mouth, and we're going to shift our focus into our back. Right? Another place where we often hold tension or we find imbalances or we have pain in our lower back, our middle back, or our upper back into our shoulders. Let's take some deep breaths and see if we can tune in to any tension, any pain in our backs, or maybe not. Maybe our back is relaxed and fluid today. But let's see if any particular spots are asking for our attention. Breathing as you're comfortable, in and out, clearing the mind as much as possible. And then naturally we shift that focus up into our shoulders and our neck. Tune in to where your shoulders, your neck are today. Are your shoulders tense and tight? Are they reaching into your ears? Maybe you want to take a nice breath and drop them down and relax and roll those shoulders into place. Find a nice open back. If any sort of inspiration to move a bit, to roll your head, to circle it, perfectly fine. Do what feels right. Do what feels natural. Really listen to yourself. Nice deep breaths there. Maybe one side is tighter than the other. One shoulder is more raised than the other. Just find that laser focus on that connection between your thoughts, your feelings, and your body. More nice deep breath, and then we're going to move into our facial muscles. This is often really unique for different individuals. Some people hold tension in their forehead, in their jaw, clenching their teeth. Just take an examination, see what's going on. Release your jaw if you need to. A nice big yawn will help do that. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Focusing on any tension in the face. And I'm going to give you just a few more breaths to let your mind wander to parts of the body where it needs to go, to relieve some tension, to check in, to tune in, and find a really relaxed state. And hopefully, now that we're a little bit more attuned to our bodies and the sensations of our bodies, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to name some really broad categories associated with our identities, under which we assume our identities. And so if you can find a way to stay connected in this state, you can open your eyes if you like. You can look at the slides or you can stay completely relaxed. But I ask that you do your best to stay connected to yourself. I'd like you to just notice as I go through some of these categories, if the body signals a preference in prioritization of some of these identities, maybe more over others. So just listen to that little inner voice, or maybe that little place that gives you a little signal in your body over some of these really broad categories. And I'm going to pause between each of them so you can give yourself a second to experience a thought or a feeling associated with each. So the first is gender. Whatever comes up for you. Whether there's a little voice saying gender is really important to me, or even more specific around that, a specific example or incident or role that it plays in your life. Or if you go, sure. The next is our strengths. Assuming an identity aligned with our strengths. The next category is our physical attributes. How much of our identity is aligned with our physical being? And next we have culture and or religion. The next is the role or roles in your family structure, in your family dynamics. Identifying as a daughter, son, mother, father, partner. Your fears and dislikes are next. How much of your identity involves your fears and your dislikes? The next is our goals and our dreams. And similarly, the next is our interests and hobbies. And then our beliefs and values. And finally, the experiences that we've had in our lives. So, as you've sort of had an initial exposure to some of these broad categories, I'd like you to just sort of think about maybe one or two that sort of really caught your attention within your body. And I'm going to ask you to reflect on a couple of questions to observe your response a little bit deeper and see if we can drill down a bit on two particular identities. So the first question is reflecting on the identities that were prominent to you. Do you feel that there are some that have been attributed to you more from external sources as opposed to your own self-determined identity? So of those identities that sort of stood out to you, yes, I'm a mother. That's very important to me. Yes, I am someone who is a seeker of justice. That's an important identity to me. Ask yourself how much of those that you feel are externally given or determined by your own self? Just a second longer on that. And as we think about some of these particular identities in our lives that have stood out for us, are there any particular identities that you feel are in conflict with one another? For example, is there one identity that is really predominant in your life? And perhaps because of that, it's sacrificed or compromised for another. Give you a minute to reflect. And the final question has to do with if there are particular identities that you present or prioritize for public expression, you're happy and open and freely present them to the world, as opposed to other identities that you keep to yourself or perhaps those closest to you. And maybe just take a moment to consider why some of these identities remain private and why some of them get to be fully expressed to the world. And from these questions, I'd like you to settle on two particular identities that you feel can face conflict with one another, or just perhaps are not currently presenting themselves in a harmonious way in your life. Just take a second to think about what two of those might be. As an example, for me, the struggle between being a mother, or what is traditionally expected to be a mother, and remaining a woman in my own right. I'll just give you one more second to sort of think about what those duality identities might be. All right. And then for those of you who have the space and are comfortable exploring a bit physically through movement, I invite you to do an exploration that will hopefully transition some of these thoughts from just within inside you to the external world. So I'd like you to consider, of these two identities that you've selected, what qualities and characteristics might be assumed to them. So maybe for you, ideas of task or ideas of imagery, or just sort of moving somatically connected through those thoughts, feeling where they feel in the body, feeling how they move, is more helpful. So I invite you to engage in a little bit of improvisational movement as you feel comfortable. To sort of come up with a motif, or maybe a gesture, a short gesture phrase, something that represents the characteristics of identity one. And then when you feel that you've solidified that, you can move into the conflicting identity two. And let's see if we can come up with a motif, a short phrase, or maybe even just a repetitive gesture for each one. Whenever you're ready. Your time, there's no rush. If you feel you have a good beat on identity one, you can move on to the second identity. Investigate how this motif is different, or maybe not. Maybe they're two sides of the same coin. See what comes up for you. I know many of us are off camera, so I won't ask you to give me a thumbs up if you feel you have those motifs developed, but if you'd like to maybe just put in the chat as to whether you feel like you would like more time or if you feel that you've sort of fully explored both of these identities, just let me know. There is no rush. All right. So it seems like maybe most of us are ready. We have a bit of an idea, a small phrase, motif, gesture for each of the two identities that we selected. And I'm going to ask now that we take a moment to explore how these identities are in relation to each other. So if these two phrases were to merge, if they were to come together in some sort of movement, choreographic engagement, don't think about it too much. Just see how these two different identities merge together. Observe. See what comes up for you. Don't force anything. Go with your impulse and see what happens. Let's just take another minute or two. If you've built a short little phrase, you've incorporated these two identities together, maybe just go through it a couple of times. Just to see how it changes or doesn't, or reinforces itself. We're just observing. And if you've finished moving, or whether you're still moving and you want to think physically about some of these concepts, I ask you to sort of think about, maybe now that these two identities have engaged with each other, how do they relate to one another? Did you notice in the way that you structured them, was there a preference for a particular identity, style of movement? Is there one that you were more willing to give time and energy to than the other? Was there a dominant motif? Maybe one got a lot more repetition, a lot more willingness to embrace it, to explore movement conventions than the other. And if so, maybe just take a moment to think about why that might be. And if you aren't sure, maybe you want to think about these questions while you try the phrase again. It's up to you. Move as physically as you like. And then I'd love to just ask and pause for a moment as a point of reflection. If there's anything that anyone wants to share, just what came up for you, anything you were surprised by, maybe even want to share your movement creation, if you'd like to be so bold. I leave it up to you. Um, would anyone like to reflect, to share anything about these representative identities that surprised you on their own in relation to each other? I know it's early in the morning and it's a lot to do some deep thinking. Um, but it's sort of fun to check in and see what happened in process.
I'll go ahead and sacrifice myself to the questions as while other people are thinking of maybe some of their responses to this movement activity. Um, and yeah, I mean, definitely as you were talking through the practice and asking us to explore, um, I felt more of a preference for one of the movements that I had developed, and it was because it's a part of my identity, I think, that I hold a bit more dear than an identity that I feel is a bit more imposed upon me, right? Which probably makes more sense if we want to do something, if we want to hold something, right? Then we're gonna probably feel more affection towards it. But then as I tried to move through the two phrases, um, I think I wanted to maybe explore the conflict between them more than my current space would allow, before I rolled into a couch. Um, but like I did feel like the desire to at least like engage the two experiences into like a bit more conversation, and wondering if maybe like the imposed identity that I feel a bit more conflict with, is really something that needed to be at conflict, And
Mm.
that's something that maybe gets unpacked in therapy. Uh, but yeah, I definitely felt this desire to communicate between the movement phrases a bit more within myself.
Mm. Awesome. Cool. That's great. Thank you. Yeah, it's always fun to be in process, I think, and just sort of be surprised by something that comes up that maybe you didn't realize was really there in the background, needing to move through your body. Did anyone else want to share anything? Ah, I see some in the chat. Oh, that's really interesting, Sharon. Yeah, sometimes I think that what's interesting is that sometimes we also perceive that things are in conflict with each other and they actually aren't. They're actually on the same spectrum and they're actually connected. And sometimes in these types of explorations, if you do give them the space and the attention, you'll find that there is kind of a synergy and maybe a way to actually live in harmony with one another. It's just that we've created this bifurcation between these two things and created tension that doesn't necessarily have to be there. Um, so I think that's why it's good to tune in sometimes and say, well, is what I'm feeling, this adversarial thing, is this true, or is this something that I'm creating for myself? That's a really, really great observation. I see something else just popped up in the chat. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, Esther, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I definitely things emerged, but I found it really difficult to put words to it. Um, I found that it was the two for me it was gender, and then I think I kind of forgot there we no I forgot the actual category, but in my mind it ended up being kind of interests and values together.
Yeah.
Um, and and I found that actually let's see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Beliefs
actually,
and
I think it ended up being kind of interest, beliefs, and values,
yeah.
but as one, but that and gender, and both of them, like Sharon said, very very they merged very well in movement for me. They kind of found a shared resonance there, which was nice, but also found that both of them um, are associated with some type of like not having either of them understood.
Yeah.
Um, really. So it was, yeah, but it was really, yeah, it was very interesting. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. That's really great. Um, Anyone else? I just don't want to make sure that anyone that wants to share gets to share. So, okay, great. And so I think, we don't really have time for this, but I think that the next step, if you were interested in engaging this process further, um, would be to sort of build this out. And, whether you're interested in, whether you're a dance maker and you actually want to sort of take a somatic practice and turn it into choreography that's presented somewhere, or for those of you that just like to think physically, I think, as we all know, as movers and dancers and people in this space, when we engage ourselves completely and think physically and move through our bodies, it can have a therapeutic like quality, or at least just sort of provide some insights into some things that are hiding in our body. There's a lot of research about how trauma feelings, things that happen to us are stored in the body, and the brain loves to overthink to compensate for feeling our feelings and to exploring the things that we need to explore. So I think this can be a helpful tool in sort of maybe thinking about how we navigate in the world, and it starts with us, right? And how we bring ourselves into these really challenging, adversarial, difficult structures in the world that we can sometimes feel powerless to. And so, if you were interested in taking this a step further, for those of you that did feel that there was still conflict between these two motifs or phrases, and you wanted to actually sort of work through that, this would be an opportunity to maybe reposition these identities to each other through a deeper exploration of choreography. So you could apply some of the traditional tools that I'm sure many of you all know, theme and variation, use of repetition. There's augmentation, fragmentation. I have them, sort of listed here, fleshing out gesture development further, but just sort of applying some of those different tools and seeing what happens. And seeing if there's more of a frustration around a particular motif, or if there becomes a way that things sort of um, engage in conflict resolution, I guess, for lack of a better term, and to sort of place it in more of a peace building context. Um, but I invite you to just reflect on this, and maybe as you move through the workshop, staying connected to who we are and some of the things that are going on inside us will be helpful to some of the other conversations that we're going to have. So with that, I just open the floor if there's any other sort of last minute discussion points or questions or things of that nature. I leave it to you. Otherwise, I will pass it back to Andy or Laura with a couple minutes to spare.
I wanted to share that for me, well, this is also connected for my point of life now and also my true identities, because I am a dance practitioner, and now I entered in the academic space, and sometimes I feel this kind of a normal division from the theory and the practice, and I know it is not like this, but at the same time, when I struggle to respect submission and writing and things and finding the space for continuous the practice. So also in theory is not like this, but in practice, the time for the practice is another time, but anyway, and so sometimes I just got lost into mental things. And it is so good for me to perceive that it's so easy when you come back to the body, but not easy in the sense that it's easy to solve, but it's easy to connect with things. And the most striking thing for me is that we, with the movement, with the body, it is not possible to perceive fixed things. So even if two identity may be contradictory or may be like struggling, at least with the movement, they are struggling. And so something is happening, and there is a possibility to move the struggle farther, And when I try to think, when I remain stuck in periods of things are just fixed like this. So there is, and so thank you, because it can be so easy, And then at the beginning, I was trying to really think to connect this idea of the identity with the movement. And then at a certain point, I just felt I just wanted to move. So something that starts from an idea, and then it's the movement itself that change things. And sometimes maybe you're just connecting or solving or struggling without thinking, this is what I am doing because this is what I have to do, And so things move in this way. So thank you. It was great.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's so important. And I think as movers, dance makers, academics in the dance space, all of us are connected to the dance space, right? In one way or another, we're connected to our bodies. I think that we are more attuned to this, but as you were saying, like taking this and making it tangible is it's something that we're lucky that we have a leg up on. But recognizing the need to do that, to release through the body and not store, continue to store these thoughts. We're very good about being in our heads and finding a place for things to go and think physically is just, I'm so glad you brought that up. Thank you. Really helpful. Ricardo, did you want to speak?
Yes, if you thank you so much first, and I would just ask questions just to put things in context.
Mm.
I mean, the experience was wonderful for me. It was also very clarifying for to see what I get right away, what comes first in mind. But I would like just to contextualize it in methodically, in the methodology of it. If you just could name a little some of your sources and some of the development, that just for me to contextualize what we've done as far as knowledge passing. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, my work, so I'm a doctoral student at the University of Auckland. I'm working more broadly academically at the intersection of dance studies and the sociology of mental health. Um, but I have a peace building lens in my practice. So a lot of my work draws from a peace building base primarily. I've done a lot under like Jean-Paul Lederach, which some of the material from here in my slides you'll see is from there. The methodology is largely aligned with a lot of trauma studies work, Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score. Many of you are familiar with that, Johan Hari. So there's, it's drawing upon sort of different somatic and healing arts modalities. I don't claim to be, I'm not a certified dance therapist. In that regard. But there is a lot of sort of therapeutic practice, and I like to use the term physical thinking that's employed from a lot of different schools of thought that sort of interlay to work from a choreographic perspective and a movements-based practice. So I wouldn't say that there's a particular methodology. It's more about sort of exploring choreographic devices through different schools of thought that align to sort of just help us see what comes up for us and different practices.
Uh, Thank you so much, Kimberly, for sharing your practice and your work and research with us. Uh, Unfortunately, we are going to be moving on now to our next presenter.